So my day just ended. It was a very successful day today.
And I'm in the Medical Science Academy.
I'm in Marketing YA.
So I'm actually going for business.
The skills and experience I have gained through my youth apprenticeship, I can take with me throughout my whole life.
I learned to use a new business software.
Public speaking and my communication skills have gone through the roof.
I get time during my day at school to work and earn money for my college.
Train like a technician, but to eventually become a certified tech.
Being an apprentice really gives you experience that others probably won't have. So it looks great on your resume.
But my favorite part about being a youth apprentice is that I got both my friends to join me. So now every time I go to work, I get to work with my friends, which makes the job a ton more fun.
See all my friends with $250,000 worth of student loan debt. I don't have any of that. I don't have to worry about none of that.
I'm stable, I have a stable job. If I get laid off, I could easily get another job within the union.
I love being a youth apprentice, and I think you will too.
So yeah, I hope this kind of gives you a first glance at what youth apprentice programs have to offer.
If you have the opportunity, take it.
If you're not an apprentice, what are you waiting for?
And good afternoon. And I would say if you don't have an apprenticeship program for youth, what are you waiting for? Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eric Seleznow. I'm a senior advisor with Jobs for the Future, and I lead our Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. And I'd like to welcome you to the Youth Apprenticeship The Time Is Now session. We'll get started in just a minute, but I really just wanted to welcome you all and thank you for making the time to be here. You know, apprenticeship in this country has gone through some major transformations in the last 6 or 8 years. One of those transformations has been the growth and interest in youth apprenticeship. So we're going to spend today talking about that emerging and growing space of in-school youth apprenticeships. And then we're going to talk a little bit about out-of-school youth apprenticeships for those youth who are not engaged in school or work. But we're going to start out with the in-school activities before we get there. This morning, I hope you all tuned in this morning. There were some powerful conversations that I think and themes that I believe really set an excellent tone for today. And the timing of these breakouts is great because now we can drill down on some of those themes and issues as we move forward today's conversation. So thanks for being here. There's a lot going on in the world of apprenticeship. There's a lot going on in the world of youth apprenticeship, and we're going to spend about the next 45 minutes talking about programs and policy and international apprenticeships and opportunity youth apprenticeships. So stick with us. It's going to be an interesting conversation. Today, I'm joined by a number of very thoughtful people. I couldn't ask for a better panel. And I'm joined, let's see, it's on my left. I don't know, it might be on your right, but I'm joined by Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary Susie LeVine from the U.S. Department of Labor, and she's currently jumped in to lead the Employment and Training Administration the last couple of months, and I'm sure they're thrilled to have you over there, Susie. Welcome. Next, it's Latitia McCane, and Latitia is my new best friend from the apprenticeship school in Newport News. I call it the Harvard of Apprenticeship Programs. It's been around for about 100 years, and we're going to hear about why they've done some great work pivoting to youth. Mary Alice McCarthy is joining us today, too. Mary Alice has a long history working in public policy as it relates to workforce and education issues, and she leads the Center for Labor and something else, skills. You'll get us straight on that, Mary Alice. But I appreciate you joining. And then lastly, we have our own Myriam Sullivan, who is an expert in many issues with us, but is leading some opportunity youth work and has some great observations from that work. So before we let's just jump right into it. I'm excited to have you all here. Thank you. And Susie, I'm going to start with you. I don't know if I call you Madam Acting Assistant Secretary or Madam Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, but I think I'll go for Susie because it's faster. Susie, I want to start with you for a couple of reasons. You've had some incredible life experiences that have brought you to this place and time now. You've worked with a major company, you've worked with Microsoft, You've been an ambassador to another country in Europe, Switzerland. You've led a workforce agency in the state of Washington, and now you're leading ETA and some of the work going on there. So as you look, and we know that the average age of apprentices in this country is 28, 29 years old, something like that. But that's not the case all over the world. And I guess I just am trying to get your sense of, we don't have a special youth apprenticeship program in the WIOA law, in the National Apprenticeship Act. There's really no special program for youth apprenticeship. They have to follow the rules as the adult apprenticeship. But where do you think we are? Where do we fit in the global apprenticeship landscape? And what do you see as the future for youth apprenticeship based on some of your previous experience? Susie?
Thank you so much for that question, Eric. I'm very humbled to be included in this amazing panel at the JFF Horizons conference today. When I served as U.S. Ambassador to Switzerland and Liechtenstein, can't forget little Liechtenstein, those countries embrace it so deeply. And I think as people often think of those countries, they think about incredibly successful economic powerhouses that punch far above their weight. And that is true. But what they don't realize is that 70%, that's 70% of young people do apprenticeship, not high school. But that culture of career actually starts in the 7th grade when young people start to do career fairs. The 8th grade, they do little career explorations. The 9th grade, they apply. The 10th grade, they start in their apprenticeships that are 3 to 4 year apprenticeships. When I had the opportunity to serve in 2014, I saw the system there. And my time at Microsoft, I'd been involved in efforts to look at 21st century skills and how do you evaluate those. And as a result, I was able to see, when I witnessed what they were doing in apprenticeship, the ultimate delivery of 21st century skills. And that, plus a paycheck, was really profound. And I worked very hard and diligently with Swiss employers to bring those apprenticeship models back to their US facilities. And that dovetailed with the administration's efforts to invest in this, not as an alternative pathway, but as an additional pathway and an equal pathway. Those investments have been so effective since 2014, basically, and thanks to you and others who are working in the Department of Labor at the time, in order to seed youth apprenticeship all across the United States, from South Carolina to Washington, to Colorado, to Wisconsin, to Connecticut, to Rhode Island, all across the United States. We have worked very hard over the past many years, and including on a bipartisan basis, to expand apprenticeship to include youth apprenticeship and to expand it to new and different areas. So it's amazing that the trades have been able to steward apprenticeship for decades now and keep it humming and running since the 1937 passage of the first National Apprenticeship Act. And now it's an opportunity to build on their work and expand and grow it. Part of what we are seeing is a recognition that there are many paths to success, and they do not all start with a university degree. And you're hearing and you're seeing this more and more. And this administration really wants to amplify and grow that even further. The American Jobs Plan, for example, proposes a $10 billion investment in pre-apprenticeship and registered apprenticeship, and includes within that a focus on youth apprenticeship. In addition to that, one of the first executive orders from President Biden reinstated the advisory committee on apprenticeship that had been dormant for these past 4 years. And of the membership there, we are including those with lived experiences, including youth apprentices. I'm happy to talk further about other grants and investments that we're making into youth apprenticeship to continue the incredible momentum that's been happening. But it is an American apprenticeship renaissance that is happening, and it is rooted in expanding youth apprenticeship. And while apprenticeship should be for people of all ages, we especially are excited about this space around youth and how we can inculcate a culture of career.
That's great. I want to ask you a follow-up, Susie. When I came out to visit you in 2014, and you took us around to 27 places in one day, what I was struck with was the employers who were integrated with the secondary school system. It wasn't a burden to them. It was part of what they thought was important. I remember one CEO said to me, it's good for a company if they apprentice, and then if they move on, it's still good for the industry that they're an apprentice. And if they go back to the university or do something else, it's good for the country. So I'm wondering if you just give us a perspective on the employer's mindset, because that's our biggest struggle, right? Everybody tuning in today knows that it's a struggle to get employers to yes on apprenticeship. We're still explaining it. We're still knocking down myths and misperceptions. But in some countries, they're engaged in it. Obviously, the U.S. is not Switzerland and vice versa. But I'm wondering if you can talk about the employer mindset that makes apprenticeship so successful in Switzerland.
Well, I'll start from the results and then I'll work back to what the investments are. Swiss employers get a 7 to 10% return on their investment, and they invest anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000 over 3 to 4 years in those employees. And what they've done is they've built systems where there's ecosystems, so a manufacturing ecosystem, a technology ecosystem, and these associations to come together to define what are the competencies and the curricula in order to keep pace with innovation. And they update those every 5 years. And you're right, there's a triad. It is the employers, it is the government, and it is academia working together to invest and perpetuate this overarching system. But the employers fund 60% of that system, which is going into both the salaries of the apprentices, the salaries and costs for the mentors, as well as into this effort to maintain the competencies and the curriculum. And the employers do what I call co-opetition. They recognize that they need to continue to grow their workforce and grow the pie, and they don't think of it as eating each other's pieces of pie. Mm-hmm. But what we see in the United States, I'll give you an example. Zurich Insurance Group introduced financial services apprentices in 2015 is when they decided they would roll it out. 2016 is when they launched it. They didn't just launch it. They then invited other employers to come together with them in the Chicago area in order to build and expand a financial services apprenticeship set of apprenticeships. They registered those, so there's registered apprenticeships. And now you see Aon is a leader in this space. Hartford is a leader in this space. And the insurance industry overall is seeing it as a way to counter their silver tsunami and to make it more relevant for young people coming into the workforce. I'll give you another example, though, that is a cautionary tale. And that was one Swiss company that started this 20 years ago in Georgia, where they were solo and they didn't have other employers around them. And they built great talent that other employers were more than happy to pluck away once they were finished their apprenticeships. So they ended up shutting down their apprenticeship. So it's really critical to have this collaboration between the employers, as well as with government and academia and philanthropy and labor, in order to have a full ecosystem to build up talent and understand that it is everybody's benefit when you invest in those individuals and make sure that those credentials have currency and can be used wherever they may be needed for those individuals so that you can add value for them.
That is such an excellent point about the employers sort of working together to reduce the cannibalism or, competition amongst them. And that is quite a story in Georgia that I've heard before in other programs. I think you see that in career and tech ed quite a bit too. But all right, Susie, thank you. Now, we're going to come back to you before the end of this because we want to hear about what's on your agenda at the Department of Labor in terms of grants, because that's why people tune into these, right? So now we're going to go from Washington way over to the eastern shore of Virginia or nearabouts to Newport News, Virginia. And Latitia McCane, it's a pleasure to have you here. Latitia, you were a chemist in your history. Chemists and engineers make the best workforce counselors, by the way. You've worked at minority serving institutions and HBCUs. You're a dedicated educator. I assume you're a dedicated chemist as well, but you bring a lot of those different experiences. And now you're the director of education at one of the finest apprenticeship programs in the country. Give us a minute or two, and then I'll ask you a tough question about, for those unfamiliar with the Newport News Shipbuilding Apprenticeship Program, have you really been around 100 years? And give us a quick history of your program.
Well, actually, we've been around 102 years now. So Yeah, so we're in the next centennial. We're owned and operated by Newport Shipbuilding, a division of Huntington Ingalls Industry. We have about 19 trades and 8 optional programs. We have a strong partnership with K-12 systems here in the Virginia area, as well as with our community colleges and other partners and university partners. We have apprenticeships that range from 4 years to 8 years. The 4-year apprenticeship is a journeyman. The 6-year apprenticeship, students earn their associate's degree. And then the 8-year apprenticeship program is our engineering program, where students earn their engineering degree from Old Dominion University. We actually, as of last July, we've been awarded by the State Council of Higher Education here in Virginia to award our own associate degrees. So we're excited about that. And we just came through as of February with the Council of Occupational Education to award our associate's degrees. So all 26 of our programs are now associate degree programs, and we continue to have that partnership with ODU for our engineering track. So that's just a little bit about us. We have about 750 students, and that fluctuates depending on the time of the year. We have 6 athletic programs, Division III programs, and I know you want to know all about our athletic programs, but we do compete on a collegiate level as well with that.
Yes, I do want to hear about that. So does everybody else, now that you mention it. But Latitia, when, was there a recent pivot to engaging more with youth? Is that in the last few years, or have you always been engaged with youth for the last 50 years? I mean, the sophisticated work of building naval ships, right? It's a heck of a lot more than welding. I know that. Although I'm sure welding is a big piece of it, but that's some sophisticated high technology work. When did you pivot, decide that you needed to engage more youth? And tell us a little bit about why youth are in this pipeline now.
So about 55% of our students are 18-year-olds. And we actually saw an increase, a fluctuation of applicants with college degrees, veterans, as well as students with a lot of college credit and debt, but no degree. And so these 18-year-olds, they were competing in this space, and we had a retention problem. As a matter of fact, over 50% of our students, we were not retaining them. So there's a lot of conversation around apprenticeships, but I like to always bring into that conversation the retention, because just because someone earns an apprenticeship doesn't mean that they keep that apprenticeship. So how do we help these students to keep their apprenticeship is kind of where we were. And so we did a deep dive into what's happening to our 18-year-olds. And we found out that many of them were failing because our program demands that you have a strong math and science background. So we're looking for students with a STEM background as well as a technical background. So that is a pretty difficult student to find. And so we realized that we were not in the K-12 space. No, our curriculum was not in that space. And that if we wanted to be competitive and we wanted our students to be successful, then a couple of years ago, we decided that we needed to start a pilot program and partner with our local K-12 high schools as well as CTE centers to give students this opportunity to be able to learn about our apprenticeship program. We also realized that students didn't know anything about our trades. We have 19 trades. The only trade they knew about, and you mentioned it, Eric, was welding. And so when they had to actually say, well, what trade would you like to be a part of? And I actually asked 2 female apprentices this yesterday, and they said, well, I just chose what sounded good. I did not know anything about any of the trades. And so we realized that we needed to expose these high school students to our trades so they can have a better understanding of what they were walking into. And then there's the environmental part of it. Shipbuilding is a tough industry. So when you bring an 18-year-old into a shipyard of 24,000 people, how do you make sure that they're comfortable and that they're successful? And so we started this virtual pre-apprenticeship program. And the reason why we started it virtually, and it was before the pandemic, we started it virtually because we have 19 states that are represented here in the school, because we do have athletics. We wanted to make sure there was equity across the board. We didn't want it to be just a Virginia type program. We wanted to be able to touch any student anywhere that wanted to be a part of our pre-apprenticeship program, and to expose them to the math skills, to give them the math skills so they could be ready day one when they walk into their apprenticeship, expose them to the different trades so they have an idea what they really wanted to be when they grow up. Because think about it, how many of us knew at 17 or 18 what we wanted to be when we grew up?
Right.
And so to expose them to the different types of trades actually gave them a leg up of when they transition into the apprenticeship. And we've had some students to transition into the apprenticeship. Once they transitioned into their apprenticeship, they really knew what they wanted to do. They really knew their career path. And that is why we decided that we needed to be in that K-12 space. And we're looking for, in the future, to have a dual enrollment type model where students can actually earn all of their academic credits while they're in high school. And once they transition to the apprentice school, they will be fast tracked into earning that associate's degree.
Right. I think our next speaker will be with that too. Was there some sort of analysis of your future workforce, the average age, people retiring, and realizing you needed to have a pathway in for other people? Was that part of it? And then if you could wrap that question up with telling us why you established athletic leagues, that would be interesting.
Well, we don't have a recruitment problem in the apprentice school. We have over 4,000 applicants for about 200 slots. But there was a business case within our company in that a lot of our leaders are retiring. And we're considered the leadership factory for our company. Majority of our students ascend into leadership roles. As a matter of fact, we can't graduate students fast enough before they become a foreman. And so, yes, there was a business case around that. We need the future leaders of our company to be trained and to be ready day one. And that there's the baby boomers are retiring. And so we need an influx of young people who are ready to move into those leadership roles. I think the best feeling in the world is when I go into or go on a ship or submarine and I see a 20-year-old leading a crew of people. And that's a big part of our pre-apprenticeship program as well, getting students prepared for those leadership roles, giving them those leadership skills. So day one, when they walk into the apprentice school, we're very intentional about preparing them to be a future leader here in the company.
Yeah, it's a terrific pathway, and you said a couple of interesting things, more than a couple of interesting things about the skills that you're doing at pre-apprenticeship or in the preparation that pays off later, and it just makes for a smooth pathway in. So, you talk about your athletic programs. I'm curious, when I was working with my friend Brent over at New America a while ago, one of the things that I learned working with him and through some focus groups they did is a lot of young people are concerned about missing out on the school play, missing out on athletics, missing out on the prom if they have to do an apprenticeship, right? So was that what motivated you to bring in sports, or you're just trying to get a name for yourself out there in Southeast Virginia?
Well, sports has been around 100 years, 102 years, as a matter of fact. When the school was founded, we had a situation where it was an all-male school, and they had all this energy. And so the founder was like, well, we need some type of athletics to entertain these young men. And so it was actually founded and stood up when the school was founded. So it's been around 102 years as well.
You're Division III, huh? Wow.
We're Division III.
That's pretty good stuff. All right, Latitia, I know I'll be coming back to you for some follow-ups, but let's move it along a little bit to my good friend, Mary Alice McCarthy, New America at the Center for Economic Education and Labor. Mary Alice has been around for a while in education and workforce, with government service, with private sector and nonprofit work, and has done some really great things over at New America. Welcome, Mary Alice. Before we get into what I really want to ask you about, New America has done a great job. Many folks who are participating today have probably heard about the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship. So I'm wondering if you could give us a minute or so on that work. I know you're working with 25 to 50 sites across the country. We're partnered with you on that to advance a certain model of youth apprenticeship. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and then I'll give you the harder questions.
Great, that's wonderful. Thank you, Eric. Thanks for the question, and thanks to you and JFF for the opportunity to be here with you at Horizon and be a part of this excellent panel. Sure, I'm always happy to talk about the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship. This is a collaborative initiative led by 9 national organizations that includes New America and includes JFF and includes many of other partners, National Governors Association, Advanced CTE, National Association for the Partnerships and Equity, and I know if I try to name them all by memory, I will, ESG, but I will forget some, so I'm going to stop right there. But this is a national collaborative of organizations that is working directly with communities across the United States to stand up and scale youth apprenticeship programs that start in high school, bridge into college, and that also provide paid on-the-job learning to the student apprentices in them. They are full-on apprenticeship programs. PIO was founded in 2019. The work that led up to it precedes that, but it was founded in 2019 and it's going strong. That was the year that we issued a small grant competition to support 9 communities interested in building youth apprenticeship programs. We weren't sure what was going to happen. And what came back to us was over 200 applications from communities all over the country, 49 out of 50 states. And since that time, we have grown the number of sort of direct grantees to, I think, around 15. We just launched our second cohort, but we have a broader network of over 40 communities that we're in regular touch with that are working hard to build youth apprenticeship opportunities. So it's an exciting space to be in.
Yeah, it is. It's really, kudos to those philanthropic investors, and kudos to the leadership that your team has put across with that. So, Mary Alice, you've done a lot of writing and thinking about everything from career pathways to credentialing to a number of other policy levers that can impact good workforce behavior, right, or good workforce programming. As you look at youth apprenticeships, the model that PIA talks about is a dual enrollment, secondary to post-secondary, transitional sort of work, learning, doing, getting paid, and to one of the points Susie made, this is not a second-rate program or second chance program, right? It's on par and footing with any other program in the high school setting. But as you think about that, it is a little bit hard to do this work because I think we're sort of cutting edge or bleeding edge doing this work because there's not a lot of youth apprenticeship. But there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of policy encouragement that has aligned the education, that has said, let's focus. There's some things over on the Hill now, the National Apprenticeship Act, and some things that the Department of Labor, I think, is thinking about now. But, from a policy point of view, is it federal policy that's important, state policy, local policy? What is it? How do we align the education and training from the related instruction? Just wanted to get your thoughts on some of the policy issues relative to this.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. And I would say it's all of the above. And you put your finger on it when you pointed out that we just sort of lack a policy infrastructure for youth apprenticeship. Frankly, we lack a strong enough policy infrastructure for apprenticeship in general, outside of the specific set of occupations in which it has flourished, the construction trades. So I think the work that has really gotten underway since 2016 has been both a combination of investments in sort of building the capacity of local communities and states to support apprenticeship, and then the policy infrastructure that's needed to do that. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I think is really important to keep in mind is that there's no lack of enthusiasm for apprenticeship, really. Anytime you talk to people about it, you get them excited about it. They want this for their communities. They particularly want it for their young people, just because we created such a sort of harsh system, kind of zero-sum system, where getting into a family-sustaining career is walking this tightrope of higher education that's very risky. So we have a lot of enthusiasm, but the enthusiasm, even the most enthusiastic communities, are going to hit some structural barriers when it comes time to actually establishing the programs. Just one of the first is just that the startup costs are high of apprenticeship. I mean, what Latitia was talking about, a 102-year-old program, once programs get established, they tend to have long lives in apprenticeship. But the process of building those complicated partnerships that she was talking about between high schools, between community colleges and employers, and ideally groups of employers, takes time. And in particular, in the case of our educational institutions, this is all pretty new for a lot of them. They are not used to doing this. They're used to keeping their students inside school. They're not used to sort of sending them out and figuring out how to still let them graduate on time, and while they're working and learning on the job. So there are high startup costs since 2016, and this sort of American apprenticeship renaissance that the principal deputy assistant secretary mentioned. That's a great term. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been invested by the Department of Labor and the Department of Education in those sort of covering those startup costs, and those have been critical. And I think part of the reason we're here talking still today about apprenticeship is because of how well targeted some of those investments were. And a critical part of those investments went to what we call workforce intermediaries, which are these organizations. They can take a variety of different forms. They can be public workforce agencies, they can be industry associations, they can be chambers, they can be community-based organizations, but they do this hard work of helping schools, colleges, employers come together, talk to one another, coordinate, because that's really, it's hard work, and the startup costs are high, and we shouldn't have any illusions about that, but it's a solvable problem. And with the investments also projected in the American Jobs Plan, that would be also go a long way towards that. A second challenge for folks who are interested in youth apprenticeship and establishing it in their community is that these partnerships, again, they're hard to set up, and then they do need ongoing support. These partnerships need care and feeding. They need to evolve. They need to continue to keep up. They need to expand. They need to bring in new employers, and they need to evolve to create to meet new industry needs. So again, there's not really a stable source of funding right now to fund, ongoing work by these workforce intermediaries or these really critical actors who keep these partnerships going. The National Apprenticeship Act of 2021, which was passed in the House in February of this year and is with the Senate, does include sort of sustained funding that could go out to states that they could use to support the critical work of these intermediaries and of these regional partnerships. So again, we're seeing the policy infrastructure take shape before us. Now we just need to get it to the enactment state. And I will say, you mentioned state policy. States can also play a critical role in helping fund and sustain these partnerships. We've seen that in North and South Carolina. We've seen it in Washington. We're seeing it in California. But again, you just can't say enough about, like, as the principal deputy assistant secretary mentioned, I mean, when you look at Switzerland, there's a lot of investment in this system. It takes time to build, and it takes a lot of investment. A third challenge that has already come up, and I think you were alluding to earlier, Eric, is that as apprenticeship as it expands out of the construction trades, it has to work with the education system, because career entry and advancement in the large majority of jobs outside the building trades requires a college degree, right? At some point, workers are going to need that college degree if it's in healthcare or financial services or even advanced manufacturing. A college degree is going to help them a lot. But this question of, like, that's not how our institutions are financed. We're not, how do you pay, who pays the college tuition costs of an apprentice in a community college or in a four-year institution? So figuring that piece out is another one of these sort of policy infrastructure pieces. A lot of states or some states have made sort of advances on that. Texas, California, again, the Carolinas. But again, it takes some thoughtful so policymaking to think through how are we going to encourage the uptake of apprenticeship by making sure that community colleges don't lose money on the deal, and making sure we're not undermining that bargain we've made with apprentices, that they get paid to learn and that they come out debt free from that experience. So those are three challenges. I just want to emphasize that they are all solvable problems with the right kinds of policies and the right kind of investments.
Yep. I want to ask you one quick follow-up. We only have about 30 seconds, so I'll have to get your short answer for now. Something that has stuck in my craw over the years, and I know there's reasons for it, but there's related technical instruction, coursework happening in continuing ed and workforce development departments around the country. Sometimes they get credit, sometimes people don't get credit. How are you going to advance these young people to get their associates or their four-year degree if colleges aren't giving credit? Is there some thinking you've done on that in terms of advancing the credit for these high school students? apprentices?
Yeah, we've actually, thinking about what we call college-connected apprenticeships and degree apprenticeships, we think is just a critical piece of sort of really expanding apprenticeship and making it that additional high-quality opportunity and career entry point. I think we need to have some conversations with accreditors, both regional accreditors and specialty accreditors, to get them more comfortable with the idea about learning on the job and that it can be high quality. And we certainly have the whole history of the building trades to point to. Again, it's just unfamiliar, although not as unfamiliar, I think, as sometimes people think it is, because there's a long history of residencies and practicums and clinicals in higher education. But it's a culture change, and it's a way of sort of seeing something differently. And they're getting there. I think we'll get there.
Thanks, Mary Alice. Very helpful, very interesting. There is a lot of infrastructure to be built on apprenticeship in general and youth apprenticeship specifically. By the way, if any of you have specific questions or comments, please send them to the chat. We've got folks monitoring it. If we have time for questions, we'll either try to answer them to you online or we'll pitch them to our expert panel. So let me quickly go to my dear friend and colleague, Myriam Sullivan. There you are, Myriam. Sorry, I lost you on my screen for a minute. Thanks for making the time. I know you're busy. I know firsthand that you're very busy, but I wanted to sort of pivot the conversation a little bit, right? We've been largely focused about in-school youth, and Latitia, I may come back to you on this one too, but we've done a project with the Department of Labor. It's the AEMF project, which you'll explain briefly, but it focuses on opportunity youth that are not in school, not in work, or out of school, out of work, and pretty much out of luck in terms of pathways into apprenticeship, right? And you've been working on this project for 2 years and you've learned a lot. I was scared to death when we went after that project because I know it's going to be challenging to get everything what people need to advance into a registered apprenticeship, right? How do you create that pathway so we can get some scale and get people advancing? So can you talk a little bit about your project and a little bit about some of the learning that you've done working with opportunity youth in registered apprenticeship?
Sure. Thank you so much, Eric, for inviting me to this conversation and providing an opportunity for me to talk about a passion project, right? I think when we first started going down the path of expanding apprenticeships for opportunity youth, we were very, very frightened. But over the last couple of years, we've had an opportunity to work with community-based organizations, workforce boards, youth serving intermediaries from across the country. We're working with a network of 15 organizations, really to think intentionally about high quality pathways for opportunity youth. And so over the last couple of years, we've really been digging deep into what that means. What is a high quality pathway? What does that mean for young people that are furthest away from opportunity? And we have had a lot of lessons learned, and we're doing this in the middle of a pandemic. Now we're in a recovery period, so lots of challenges, Eric. But one of the things that I've heard show up in some of the other remarks is the need for partnerships, right? So robust partnerships in communities. So that showed up in communities in Connecticut. We're working with Goodwills in Georgia and Tennessee. So building out the apprenticeship ecosystem, and when you're thinking about a specific population, really requires intentionality and partnerships. A second theme that really showed up for us is building the on-ramps. So a pre-apprenticeship, a bridge to pre-apprenticeship to a pre-apprenticeship. So a bridge to a bridge is, some of the conversations that we're having, but it's really important that we set up these young people for success. Another theme that's popped up that really pushed us during the pandemic is really employing hybrid models, right? So having multiple modalities for instructional delivery, including robust mentorships, which is really critical, mentorship alike. So if I'm in a STEM program, it'd be great to have a Black female mentor to really help shepherd me through the organizational culture, through the related instruction. A couple of other really key points that's showed up for us in this work is really, oftentimes with intermediaries, we're developing programs for people, but really including the youth voice as part of that, right? So it's a collaborative partner. So it's not just employer engagement partnerships, but we're really including young people as part of this. They are the untapped talent to meet the employer demand. So we've learned a lot. I think Mary Alice talked about funding. A key thing was for us, like finding multiple funding sources to provide the wraparound supports, the supportive services, and everything else that's needed to facilitate success, persistence, and completion.
Not any worse or any better than any other special population that needs support, right? And support is the key. So that's a really great point about how do you bring the wraparound. But you've in a fairly short period of time, you have over 500 apprentices that you've been able to enroll in these programs. And folks, it's hard enough to do it within school youth who are on a degree path, and then you have out of school youth, which I know is a very diverse and whatever the opposite of monolithic is, but you've got people from a variety of backgrounds who are out of school, out of work, and trying to get connected. What advice would you have somebody listening today that if they were going to start an apprenticeship program that wants to serve higher risk opportunity youth, what would be your advice to them?
There are people all over the country, intermediaries that know how to do this well. So partnerships is key, and that's one of the strategies that I employed in our project. We have partners in Milwaukee that know how to do this well, in Pennsylvania. So definitely connect to folks in the trades, folks in labor, folks that have been doing this well, and then also bring on the layer of community-based organizations that really know how to work with young people. So forming a collaborative partnership that includes the apprenticeship partners that can help, and then also the folks that know young people and can facilitate their success.
That's great. And as Mary Alice says, intermediaries are the glue that holds these projects together out in the community. So 15 sites across the country cranking out apprentices. It's a great model. You've learned so much, Myriam, and I'm sure your phone will ring off the hook next week. Sorry about that. We only have a couple minutes left, everybody, but I want to go do a lightning round with you. And I want to pick up from a theme from this morning. And I want to also pick up Susie, with you, because I know with the Biden-Harris administration and Secretary Walsh and your history, that equity becomes a really important priority for all sorts of workforce programs, but particularly an apprenticeship because it's got a long history. We built we built a lot of modern day apprenticeships on the shoulder of labor programs, but our equity issues for women, for people of color, people with disabilities have not been stellar or high numbers. So how do you see youth apprenticeship helping that and focusing on equity? And then if you could end that saying what's on the horizon for DOL, that would be helpful. About a minute each.
Well, thank you so much for asking. Equity is essential to all of this. That has to be the initial lens with which we build these programs and these services out. And we need to think about the entire person and not just here's a job, go. It needs to be the wraparound services that accompany the apprenticeship programs in order to incorporate people who are more marginalized and other communities who may not ordinarily be able to have access to this. It's programs like career placement programs that are equipping them with how do you just have core job skills before you even go into that apprenticeship, and making sure that individuals have access to that and incorporating that into youth apprenticeship. So as we build out, for example, the grants that are coming out in the next couple of weeks, where 40 million out of $82 million of the state apprenticeship grants are very specifically about equity, diversity, and inclusion. We also have the Technical Assistance Center of Excellence related directly to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So those investments aren't waiting until we pass our fiscal year 22 budget or the American Jobs Plan. We can't wait. We have to incorporate that absolutely right now, and it is a very top priority for this administration, for this department, and for this agency.
Thanks so much for that. So glad to have you over at ETA. Latitia, very briefly, you talked about having some girls that you talked to yesterday, young women, I should say. Talk to me about your outreach and diversity and whether that's been a challenge for you or you're having some success.
It's been a very serious challenge. We have a female basketball team, and for the majority of our female population, they come through the basketball team. So we've been very intentional in actually putting this piece within our pre-apprenticeship program. As a matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago, I awarded 7 students an apprenticeship that moved them from our pre-apprenticeship to our apprenticeship program. And we were able to increase our female population just by having that pre-apprenticeship program. So I think that the more we're intentional about partnering with our K-12 partners to increase our pipeline, we're going to see more and more students of color as well as females into our apprenticeship program. So we're working hard on it.
Thank you. Mary Alice, you're going to give me the hook in a minute, but real quickly, any quick lasting thoughts on equity that you say is a way to enhance this process?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would just say apprenticeship can be an equity strategy. It is an equity strategy. It's a great strategy to address inequities in our current higher education system and the way our higher education system exacerbates inequality. And I'd also say community colleges are very diverse places with very diverse student bodies. So having them more involved in sort of recruiting and supporting apprentices is another way that I think we can support equity.
That's great. Last words to you. Got about 10 seconds, Myriam. Not that I want to pressure you. I know you're working with diverse populations out there. Any thoughts on how this all comes together?
Yeah, equity is more than a buzzword, and we need to create programs where young people feel safe and supported, and that's something that we can all participate in, including employer partners. So thank you for having me.
All right. Well, I apologize because I ran a little bit over, but Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary Susie LeVine, Latitia McCane from the Newport News Apprenticeship School, Mary Alice McCarthy from New America, and our own Myriam Sullivan. Thanks so much for making the time. I'm sure we'll get some comments on it, and I look forward to the next couple of years at ETA and DOL, Susie, so good luck with that, and good luck, and thank you to all of you. Signing.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.